Hello and welcome to this new video. My name is John and I'm a technical presets consultant for the topic of Fortify. And in this video, I want to show you how you can install ScanCentral DAST, configure it, and also how to work with setting up a scan. And I also want to give you some troubleshoot tips and tricks. So first of all, let's start with what is ScanCentral DAST. For that, I want to switch to our documentation first. So let's go to microfocus.com/documentation and we will have a look at the ScanCentral DAST documentation, because there's a nice guide or a nice explanation of what is ScanCentral DAST and how we can work with ScanCentral DAST. So first of all, you can find anything that I will show you in this video in our documentation here. So configuring DAST scans, setting up the whole environment. So these are things that we will cover in this video, but you can have a look at that later. But first of all, what is ScanCentral DAST? So ScanCentral DAST is a sensor-based way of scanning applications dynamically. So what I mean with that, as you know, there is Fortify Web Inspect, and ScanCentral DAST is a more sensor-based approach to do the dynamic scanning with Fortify Web Inspect. And the cool thing about ScanCentral DAST is that it is directly integrated into the Software Security Center. So you can have a look at all scans that are going on or set up a new scan inside of the Software Security Center. And this is a nice overview how the architecture looks like. So we have these three main components here. First of all, we have our Web Inspect sensor. So this is the actual scan engine itself. So we can use Web Inspect that is already installed with a GUI, but we can also use Web Inspect as sensors in Docker containers, and that is also that we use in this video. So we will use the Web Inspect container based on Docker, and this is actually the scan engine behind everything. And the Web Inspect sensors are connected to the ScanCentral API, and ScanCentral itself will be is based on three different things that you can see here in the black box. So let's go into the black box here. That is the main, or that are the main components of ScanCentral DAST. First of all, we have our API, and as you can see, the API is connected to everything because the API is the central thing that communicates with everything. So it will communicate with the LIM, with the global service, with the sensors, but also with the Software Security Center and also with the ScanCentral DAST database, because the ScanCentral DAST service is based on the API. So the API will take care of all the communications with other APIs or the databases, and it will also communicate with the global service. And the global service is part of ScanCentral DAST because it will take care of all background tasks. So that means that it will take care of handling scans and define or give it to special sensors. So it will take care of all these background tasks and will take care about that. And the last thing that we have in our ScanCentral DAST main component here is the LIM server. And the LIM server is the license and infrastructure manager. That means it will take care of all things regarding licensing. So of course we need license to start a scan, and the LIM is the right place for that. So we will install licenses in our LIM server, and it will give us license to scan actually our web applications. So this, as you can see, are the three main components, or 3.5 main components of ScanCentral DAST. And as I said in the beginning, this is very smart and cool because we can have a look at the running scans and also start a scan directly in the Software Security Center. And of course, we need a Software Security Center to start ScanCentral DAST. And behind the Software Security Center, we of course have our SSC database to store all information from all scans. And we also have a ScanCentral DAST database that is especially for the ScanCentral DAST configuration and also for storing all scan results. But the overall goal is, of course, to process these results into the Software Security Center database. But these are the main components of ScanCentral DAST, but you can also have a look at all the detailed description down below. But yeah, this is the first explanation of what is ScanCentral DAST. And with that, we can go straight forward and have a look at the system requirements, because it is very important that we know what kind of system we need for that, and how many gigabytes of RAM we need, how many cores, and where we have our system requirements that I already open up in a new tab, where we can just go to ScanCentral DAST and have a look at all these different components. So you can have a look at the database. So it's very important that this is a SQL database 2019. Very important here is as well that this is an English version, because otherwise you will get some errors or issues with formatting dates and time. So it is very important to use SQL Server 2019. And you can also have a look at the core components. That means the global service that I mentioned at the DAST API, and for that we need Windows 10 or the Windows Server 2019. Of course, we need Docker, because everything is based on Docker from the ScanCentral DAST perspective, and we need a little bit of RAM and also a lot of cores for the processor. So yeah, with that knowledge we can actually start. So in this case, I'm running everything on a complete fresh and new AWS Windows Server 2019 instance with 16 kernels and 32 gigabytes of RAM. The SQL Server 2019 is already installed by default. Docker is installed. The Software Security Center is also on this machine. And I also installed .NET Core 3.1 for our configuration tool that I will explain a little bit later. So just to give you an understanding of what is already here in this environment. So as I said, we have this Software Security Center already here, so we will not take care of this installation. And I also already started the LIM server. So I already started the LIM servers on this machine, so we don't need to take care about that. So yeah, with that, this is maybe the introduction. So let's go directly into the preparation, because before we start with the actual installation of ScanCentral DAST, we need to prepare some things. First of all, we need to create a database login, because we need to create the database, and we also need to have access to the database on this server. So we can go into the SQL Server Management Studio and create a new user. So you can also use the Windows user for the administration, but it's better or much clearer, much easier to use a SQL Server login that we need in our config tool. But in this case, I already made some notes here. So we will create a user called the ScanCentral DAST. So I will copy this. We need to go into security, into logins, just right click on the logins and create a new login. And where is the SQL Server is asking us what kind of authentication we want. In this case, we want to make sure that this is a SQL Server authentication. We will enter our password in here. So use this password, make sure everything is fine in here. Very important note, and at this step and also for the further steps, this will be a demo or a demo environment for ScanCentral DAST. So I would highly recommend to read the documentation to have a look at the security perspective, because we will use much less security or some less security methods in this case, because I want to show you how the process looks like. But this is not recommended to do this for production, maybe for testing, but for production you definitely need to set up some more security things there. But we need to make sure in this case that this account will be able to get a database owner. So I will just make that as a system administrator to make sure everything's working fine. Click on OK, and the user is there. Another thing that we need to check is, of course, if we go to our database server here, just click on right-click properties, and there we have a point called security. We need to make sure, because we are using the SQL Server authentication, we need to make sure that the SQL Server authentication is actually activated, because otherwise we will not have a chance to log in here. So make sure that this is activated, and this is I think that's it already for the preparation of the database server. So we can close that. And the next thing that we need to prepare are the license. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I already run the license and infrastructure manager, but I did not set up any kind of license yet. So I will log into the LIMP server, click on licenses, and here we go. There are no licenses, so I will put in a temporary test license in here. So click on add license, enter the activation token, just a simple description here, click on OK, and everything works fine. So this license key is for 10 trial licenses for weapon-spec concurrent. So it is important that you are using weapon-spec concurrent licenses, otherwise it will not work. And so we imported the product license, but let's switch into the pools and also create a license pool for that. So we need to make sure that we have a pool with all these available licenses that we can use for ScanCentral DAST. So click on OK, add a license. In this case, we have 10 seat counts available, and I will use that all for my ScanCentral DAST installation. Click on OK, and that seems fine. The only thing that you can do is just click on force license refresh to make sure everything is fine. Yeah, that's it. The last thing that we need, it's the last main thing that we need to do, is to create a SSC user. So this is not 100% necessary, but in our case, we will create a dedicated user for our SSC to make sure that we have a good overview about our users there. So go to administration, to users, to local, and click on add, and we will create a user called ScanCentral DAST. Make sure, okay, first name, last name. In this case, it's just a demo environment. So I will enter test.com password. Let's take the same as before to make things easier, and make sure the password will never expire, and the role administrator, click on save, and now we have created a new user. So let's test it out directly here. Just enter the username and the password and have a look at, okay, everything's working. So let's close everything here. So with that, there's only one last step that is important for further steps, because we need to make sure that every service that we are running, so the SSC, the license and infrastructure manager and the ScanCentral DAST API that you will see in the next steps. We need to make sure that everything or every port is open and connection is there. So please make sure that there is no port that is already in use, and please make sure every connection between different components is fine. So of course, in this case, I install everything on one machine, but you can of course separate everything into other machines. So you can run your SSC on another server, your LIM on another server. That's completely possible. But in this case, I will install everything on this machine. And with that, we are finished with the preparations part. So let's get into the actual installation. And for the installation of ScanCentral DAST, we can use a config tool named ScanCentral DAST config tool, and we will execute this setup here. So we will install it, and this is a nice and smart way to install ScanCentral DAST. So it will guide us through the different steps. So with the config tool, we will configure everything that we need for ScanCentral DAST. So let's start with the first thing, and that is the database connection. For that, I'm using the same, or I will use the database on my system. So I will enter the IP address of my system in here. It is very important to not use localhost at this point or at every point here, because at some point we will generate some scripts for weapon spec sensors, and these sensors try to connect to the sensor or the API, not to the sensor, to the global service or the API. And it's very, very important that we don't use localhost at any point. So please to make sure that you use the IP address or the host name as long as this is reachable. So in this case, we are using the database on the system, also with the default database port. If you want to change the port, you can just type it in here. Just type in the comma and the port of or the port what you want to use. So in this case, I don't want to use that. So we will go ahead with our database username and our password. And now we can use the we can have a look at the existing databases. In this case, it's only the SSC database, but we will create another database. So we are going to create a new database, and we will call it, we will call it same as above, ScanCentral DAST. So in this case, we're using the SQL Server authentication, so we don't need to check this Windows authentication, and we can click on validate, and that is working. The next thing that we need to set up is the standard account. This standard account is for, like the explanation here says, is for everyday use. So you can use the user that you entered here, but you can also create a new user for security purposes. So, but in this case, I will use the same user because this is just a test environment. So I will enter the username and the password, click on validate, and click on next. So on this, on the next page, we are going to seed the database. So, or initialize the database. You can use the default secure base.zip file to initialize the database, and that's the thing that we are now doing. So just click on initialize database, and this will take about 20 minutes. It could be less or a little bit more, depends on your connection to your database. But I will just fast forward this thing here. Okay, the creation of the database is complete, and we can click here on OK and go to the next step. And the next step is regarding the SSL configuration. I would highly recommend to use an official certificate to run ScanCentral DAST, but in my case, I will not use an SSL certificate because I have no one on this machine. But as I said, I would highly recommend to use one. But you can also generate a self-signed certificate in here, but I will just click on Do Not Use SSL and acknowledge this and click on Next. And the next page is actually the last one, because in this we need to configure the SSC settings first. So we need to configure where is our SSC. So I will paste in the URL here. And now we can use our new SSC username, ScanCentral DAST, with our password here and click on validate. So everything is fine. The next thing is the DAST API, ScanCentral DAST API settings. So in this case, we can define where the API will be on our system. So in this case, I will use just the port 85 because there is no other application, and click on /API. So as I said, you can also have a look at the documentation for these steps. There's also a syntax guide that you can use, but in this case, I will use this syntax in here, and I will also allow all origin for course policy. So in this case, you might add your SSC to this to make sure only this connection is allowed. But in my case, I will allow every connection. And the next thing is the LIMP server. So we need to add our LIMP server address. In this case, it's important to use the LIMP service, not the LIMP admin, like the user interface in the web in the browser. So you need to make sure that this is the LIMP service. So I will use my admin account here, and we need to define our pool that we created a couple of minutes ago. So I clicked on validate, everything is fine. The next setting that you can use is proxy. In this case, I don't need any proxy, so I will skip that. And the last thing that we need to enter here is the sensor settings, especially the sensor service token. And that is a token that makes sure that the connection between the sensors and the ScanCentral DAST API is secure, so authenticated. And in this case, we can also create this service token. So it will encrypt it afterwards, but in this case, we can enter it here. So please make sure that you have this on your machine and you have access to this token later. The other settings are completely fine for this environment. So we allow untrusted server certificates, and we don't want to retain completed scans. Smart update URL for updates, as well as licensing URL is completely fine. So we click on next, and the next thing that we can do is download our launch artifacts. But what is this? Let me store that on the desktop here, and we can go into the folder now. So click on desktop, and I will extract it here. And inside of this eDAST start folder are a couple of things. First of all, we have our service token that we created in the step before. That is in this case encrypted. Yeah, that is the service token. In the app settings.json, we can have a look at all our configuration that we defined here. So here's our API address, for example, and default scanner pool ID. In this case, it's 0, and our service token. So everything regarding the connection from the sensors to the API. Yeah, and the other things that are inside of here are mostly PowerShell scripts, because these are scripts to download and run the needed Docker containers. So all these Docker containers that are in here are not all, but most of the Docker containers are private. So make sure that you are part of the private repository to access these Docker containers. But let's have a look at the first script in here. So you can see there are a couple of different things. First of all, we have a lot of pull things, and also pull and start. So these two things here will just pull the images. These two scripts will pull and start the containers, and these two scripts just start the containers. So we can choose what we want to use, but let's have a look at pull and start containers. So I will just click on edit to show you what's inside here. So you can see that there are different points in here. First of all, we have some informations for our terminal, but the real interesting thing begins in the next, in line 9, because in this case we will start our ScanCentral DAST API, and in line 12 we will run our ScanCentral DAST global service. So that are the main components that I talked before, and in line 2 and 5 it will download these things. In my case, I already pulled the images or the containers, so I would be able to start that very easily. So in this case, I will copy this command in here and open up another PowerShell and copy it in here. So the ScanCentral DAST API should be running fine. And now I will also copy it in here to make sure the global service is running. So, and with that, we should be able to see now all containers in here. So we have our global service, our DAST API, and in my case, I'm running the LIM server as well on a container. So that should be fine. So the next thing that we can do is to jump into our software security center to enable ScanCentral DAST in SSC. So let's go into the software security center, just log in as administrator in this case, and you can see we don't have ScanCentral DAST enabled yet because you can't see it in the top menu bar. So you need to go to the administration, then configuration, and ScanCentral DAST. And there you need to enable ScanCentral DAST and put in the API that we defined before. Let's copy that from my notes and click on save. And now you can see that there is a ScanCentral tab, and you can also see that there is the DAST option. So there is currently an error, but let's restart the SSC first. So just to make sure that everything is running fine, I will copy the URL in here. So every time you make a change at the administration or especially at the ScanCentral DAST, I would recommend to restart the SSC and to make sure everything is running smoothly. So just have a look at our containers now. So it should be running fine. We can also have a look at the logs inside of the Docker containers. So just type in docker logs.f to have a continued view on the logs, and maybe go into our ScanCentral DAST API, and you will have a look at the the logs in here. So that is maybe is another tip that I can give you. So let's wait until the SSC is back again. Okay, it is back again. And now when we click on ScanCentral DAST, we can see everything is working fine. So we finally configured ScanCentral DAST completely fine. And you can see there is no data in here, but let's have a look at all the things that we can have a look at. So first of all, we have our scans in here where we can start a new scan that we will do later, but let's go to the other options. Then we have our sensors. At the moment, we don't have any sensor, so maybe we can start with that to start a sensor. So let's go back into our folder in here, and we want to start a sensor. But let's first of all have a look at the command in here. So you can see we have this command here, and important to know here is, so we can see everything that we configured in the ScanCentral DAST config tool, like the API of ScanCentral of the ScanCentral DAST API, that we allowed non-trusted certificates, our encrypted service token, and our scanner pool ID is just default by null. Important to know here is at the default things for memory and CPU is 8 GB and 2 cores of CPU, or 2 CPU cores. That's not enough. So this is actually a feature that is not implemented yet, but you need to change it to maybe 16 and 4 in this case. And you also need to make sure that this is Fortify docker /web inspect. And after that, I can copy this and just exit this log in here and start our sensor. Copy it again. So it will start up now. So this can take a couple of seconds, but let's go back into our interface. So the next thing that we can see is our sensor pools. In this case, we only have one, the default one, so that's completely fine. If you want to create a new one, just click on new pool. We can also have a look at the settings list that we will have a look at when we start a scan, and also the scan schedules. That is important if you want to schedule a scan. But let's have a look at the sensors and refresh it. So it could take a couple of seconds in here. So let's have a look at containers. Oh, sorry, if they are up and running. Okay, so our ScanCentral DAST sensor is now up and running, so it will connect automatically, and now he is here. So we can start to create a new scan. So let's go to scans and click on new scans. The first thing that we need to select is an application. So this will have a look at our applications in here. So I created an application called 0 in the version 1.0 without any kind of auditing information now. So we will create a new scan for our 0 web application in the version 1.0. So we will create complete new settings and click on next. So we want to do a standard scan. You can also choose between the workflow driven scan or the API scan, but we will do just the standard scan. And we also we will do a crawl and audit, so just the normal scan of our web application, and we will scan our 0.webappsecurity.com test page. So you're also able to scan this application, because this is from us, from Micro Focus, and you can use it to test Web Inspect or ScanCentral DAST. So I will paste the URL in here. Important to know is if you want to publish the results into your SSC application automatically, you need to make sure that this submit for triage is enabled. And we will just use the standard audit dev as well as the user agent. You can also set up the proxy settings in here, but in this case we don't need that, so just click on next. The next thing is very interesting because we can do or we can use a site authentication, so you can enable it in here. The interesting thing about here that is you can actually download the macro recorder from the SSC to your machine, because you need to download the macro recorder on your machine, install it there. That's a very lightweight program, and after that you are able to create a login macro. So maybe let's try that out. I will simply install this on my machine, and we will create I will show you how you can easily create a new login macro. So in this case, we need to install it, but if it's already installed in your machine, you only need to click on Open Macro Recorder, and it will automatically open up your macro recorder. So I think it will open up automatically. If not, we can also click on Open Macro Recorder, and we can use the macro recorder and open it up. And now we can see how this will work in production. So maybe it will take a couple of seconds because we just installed it on our machine. So just wait a little bit more to start up the login macro recorder. So it is here. Oh, okay, it's open up. So this is the login macro recorder, and the thing we only need to provide the URL from our application. So copy paste the URL. Oh, it is opened. Yes, so this looks better. So just click on record, navigate to your URL, click on your sign in button, enter username and password, click on sign in, wait until you signed in, click on stop recording, just replay the whole recording. So there is another video on how to record a login macro, but I will just demonstrate you how easy it is to use it in ScanCentral DAST. So now you need to select an object that is only there after you successfully logged in, and it will automatically detecting the logout conditions for you. And this was successful, so we can save this file as let's call it 0 username, and we will store it on the desktop. So we can close this in here and go back to our configuration. Let's say, okay, we want this site authentication. We only need to click on import and select our web macro. And in this case, that's it. So we can click on next. We don't need to add a load host or a single page application is automatic. That's fine. We don't need a traffic monitor. And in this case, we only need to create a new name for our settings. So I will just go with 0 with login and save this to our settings. So in this case, it will create a settings identifier, and we can use this settings identifier to integrate this scan in different kinds of CI/CD pipelines. But in this case, we want to run it just manually. So select run scan, sensors, any available. You can also specifically choose a sensor in this stage, but I will go for that. Click on run, and you can see the scan has been queued to the run, and click on close, and it is now in here. And we will just wait a couple of seconds until it begin, and I will also fast forward this section, and we will continue after the scan was successful. Okay, so back at the scan, we can see that the scan was successful and complete. So you can see at the status, this was complete, and this took about 30 minutes. And if we click here, we can also get a couple of more detailed description, but we can also see that the import of the results is also completed. So when we go into our applications, to our Zero application, we can see that all the findings from the scans are now in here. So that was completely successful. And with that, I think we are complete and finished with the ScanCentral DAST installation and configuration. Now I want to give you some tips and tricks regarding troubleshooting. Some based on my experience, and some based on our documentation, that you can also have a look at it. But let's start with the first tip, and that is if you're using Chrome, it could be that there is an issue with HTTP. So if you're using, in my environment, just HTTP, it could be that you can't display the ScanCentral DAST interface. So if we go into our Chrome browser and open up the SSC, we can log in as administrator, and it could be that you get, and it could be that you can't see anything here. So in this case, you can't see anything, but it could be that you can't see anything because of some missing certificates, or because Chrome is blocking HTTP things. And for that, you need to click on Not Secure, Site Settings, and scroll down to Insecure Content. And by default, it's blocked, but please make sure to allow it. So that is one thing that I experienced in the past, that this could solve some issues. So this is the first tip. Then another tip is, of course, the topic of ports and network. Please make sure that you have every connection that you need. So please also make sure that this computer you're now on has access to the API itself. So please make sure that everything is set up correctly. So maybe you need to check the Windows firewall and enable some applications there. So please make sure that everything regarding ports and network is fine. The next thing that I want to show you that could be very helpful is to have a look at the database. So when we go into our ScanCentral DAST database, we can have a look at the different tables now. And there are some tables that can be helpful if you want to troubleshoot anything. So when you go to databases, to the ScanCentral DAST database and tables, you can have a look at the configuration settings table. So you only need to click on the right. You can select top 1000 rows, or you can directly edit it. In this case, I will just select it, and you will have a look at all the things that are inside of that. So you can see here are all information that you can have or edit regarding of the ScanCentral DAST configuration. I would not recommend to edit it in here, but it is a good identifier to make sure everything is right. So you can also have a look at the API here, for example, or non-trusted certificates. So everything that you set up in the configuration is inside of here. So you can have a look at that to maybe troubleshoot something in this direction. And another, or the last thing to what can causes some issues that is very important is a simple slash, because it could be, if you open up the ScanCentral DAST configuration tool, it could be that there are some issues with ScanCentral DAST after you started the Docker image, because you forgot a slash in the settings configuration. Or you put an unnecessary slash into the configuration. So please make sure that at the end of these settings is no slash, and also at the API settings or the LIMS servers. So please make sure everything is the same syntax. So that is very important. And also when it comes to the SSC, so when you are at the administration, go to the configuration and ScanCentral DAST. In some cases, there are some issues with ScanCentral DAST because you just put a slash in here. So an unnecessary slash in here could cause some issues. But as I said, these are some causes. But that is something that I really want to share with you. And with that, I think we are finished. So thank you very much for watching. And if you can, please subscribe to this channel to get all new videos. And if you have some feedback, please let me know in the comments. And it would be very, very helpful if you can like and share this video with your colleagues. So thank you very much. Have a nice day, and we will see us soon. Bye.